Hello, thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel, Reverend MeeLing. I'm Reverend MeeLing, also known as Susan MeeLing, Reverend Susan MeeLing, Lady MeeLing, Lady Dori, Belle. I've been known by a few names. So I'm going to continue on with the references of explaining from the short book, Finding the Silver Lining, and showing the pages before giving the synopsis of. And so, in reference to what occurred at Fort Sam Houston in what used to be called Brooke Army Medical Center, though now San Antonio Medical Center, in regards of what happened there, what did I call it? The dark cartoon humor. Because it realistically did look like a Scooby-Doo cartoon. That's why. Not making fun of the situation, just the realistic aspects of. Now, I had discussed that or wrote about that, but also discussed that. I told people that it looked like a Scooby-Doo cartoon well before putting it into writing. The few that I actually was able to talk about that with, because by that time, the individuals that I had at one point in time considered to be friends and family had already essentially treated me similarly to my biological family in certain regards. If that had to do with the aspects of, obviously, I did not know about the hacking issue or people doing certain things when it came to technology in that regard. The aspects of my biological mother doing the updates on the laptop, so I would guesstimate certain things probably I was blamed for hypothetically that were actually her fault or my biological sister's fault, or, anybody else that had done that sort of stuff, because I have this tendency to just be honest. I can't be anything except honest. So while there are those who have that capability, I am not one of those people. And I know that seems weird in this era. This is the 5th of June, 2020 still. Back in 2012, while I know there are some that weren't in that aspect, there were plenty of those who did either believe the drama that was caused by others' issues, the claim that because I was dealing with what I was dealing with, it was not considered, well, I had people flat out tell me they thought I was lying. And they wouldn't believe me unless I provided documents. Even though they weren't actual court system, they were just random civilians that I knew. As far as what was going on with my daughter and my son at the time. And so, the irony is I actually did put together the documents, and not anybody that I had known ever spoke with me about that. And what I mean in that reference is in regards to when I was in Washington State. Nobody had ever asked me about that stuff in person if I had known them when in the state of Texas. Nobody had actually told me, to be honest with you, whoever in regards to that, nobody had actually told me that they knew me in the state of Texas when I was in Washington State. Nobody had nothing in that regard. Nobody. And it would have been as simple as were you ever in the state of Texas? And, you know, I would have told the truth, obviously. And if anybody had ever spoken with me, I might have at one point in time, like if they said they had seen me before, probably like would have brought up, well, I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, and it was during basic training, and I had a coma, and I woke up in the state of Texas. So if anybody tried to hypothetically tell others that I didn't acknowledge being from the state of Texas in regards to after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, well, that would be a lie on their part, not mine. Because if there may be one of maybe a couple, I don't know how many, YouTube official videos I have done where obviously there's this one in reference to me bringing up my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. Maybe there's another one that could bring that, point to give as an example. I don't know. I would guesstimate possibly there's at least a couple of other official YouTube channel Reverend MeeLing videos that I've discussed that. So, I don't play games with people. I don't play games at all. I don't like, now that I know that is something that other people do, I don't appreciate that at all whatsoever. But then again, I haven't had that luxury, I guess, to look at life as such. I've always, looked at life as surviving and being as comfortable as possible, despite situations. And I've preferred to be far more comfortable than I've been over my lifetime. However, no matter what I've done to attempt to do that, there seems to be these issues that have gotten in the way of that. For example, I was actually extremely comfortable in my house in San Antonio, with the exception of like when Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kirkendall Jr., in that situation, when he wasn't there, and obviously that was after the final separation from my now dead ex-husband, and it was just my son, my daughter, and I, and my dogs. I enjoyed that. I was comfortable, in my house in Carrollton, Texas. I was comfortable until that stuff, as far as McCoy Elementary School, had been an issue. And that whole Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kirkendall Jr., had been an issue. I was actually, comfortable. And then, all those other things. I would guesstimate hypothetically, whether you believe it or not, there probably was a better climate at that time when I was actually in a good mood. And so, there could be just a little weird coinky-dink in that regard. But I would guesstimate that when I've been in a good mood and have had less pain by a lot, especially in reference to like when I was in Washington State. Not that it's not a beautiful state, that's not it at all. Just, that electrical problem, issue, technology. Probably there were less climate issues. Hypothetically, I don't want to, assume all that. However, probably like when I'm in a really good mood and certain things are taken care of instead of what has been going on. Like when I was scuba diving, I was in a really good mood. And then, then there were certain issues in that regard. And, then there were other issues where that is what it is. So, despite the fact that I had actually earned stuff, the credit and that. So, in the last aspect of this, however many part series that this is going to wind up being, went and took my son, my daughter, and my niece to Florida to see the beaches there. My son and my daughter had only seen the Gulf of Mexico beaches, specifically off of the Texas area coastline. And I was made fun of when talking with other people because I had told them that I had never seen so many oil slicks. And I was told that I was being snobby because I grew up in New Jersey going to the beaches there. And which was a dichotomy for me because it was one of those in the 1980s and 1990s, especially the early 1990s. I wouldn't say that's realistically spoiled when you really think about it. Because for those who grew up on the East Coast or in the East Coast region, or at least kept up with the news from that region, there were a lot of needles found on those beaches, by a lot. And I didn't think I was being rude when I said there were a bunch of oil slicks in the sand. And I thought that it was important for that to be cleaned up and cleared out. And I was told that I was being snobby about that. And I didn't really think that was snobby so much as pointing out the facts. And so the individuals that I knew from the state of Texas, from like the years of 2003 all the way up to 2012, but in more specific 2003 to 2009, 2010, I was told that I was snobby because all I was thinking about, for those who know that area, especially at that time frame, they thought that the beaches in New Jersey were white sands. And those from the vicinity would know that those beaches were not white sand beaches. Not unless you consider the bottles to be, because they were white, but that wasn't sand, those were bottles. And so on and so forth. However, I was told that I was being snobby for growing up in New Jersey, going to beaches in New Jersey in the 1980s and 1990s to compare those beaches to the ones that I saw on the Texas coastline. I would guesstimate at this point there's a few people who could be like, no, not at all. No, that's not snobby at all, because that's just pointing out, like there's oil slicks. I'm sure, there have been some individuals working on, clearing that up. The last time I saw the Texas beaches before 2019 had been, what was it? 2007, I think, maybe 2006. And I had brought up, I was like, there looks like there really needs to be something taken care of. Like, I don't know why all these oil slicks are, in the sand, but that is a big concern. Like, I don't know where there is a leak, because that is got to be a leak somewhere for those oil slicks to continue washing up. And people that I knew, oh, you're just being snobby. no, I'm trying to protect the people of the state of Texas. Like, and then like the other Gulf Coast states and countries. My bad. I didn't think that was considered being snobby. I kind of figured pointing out that there's oil slicks on the sand, and in the sand that, maybe like some of the, I mean, I see oil rigs like there, and there, and then people that like I had been at the vicinity of, some of them were like, "Where do you see oil rigs? How do you not see them? They're like right there. They're like right there. Like you can't see like on the horizon, like right there." No, 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 no. That's a ship. Do you know ships that send out smoke like that? I don't know. I haven't seen, I mean, I've seen ships that send out smoke, just not like that. And, whatever. And even in 2011, went to the beach down there with my son and my daughter and my now ex-boyfriend Patrick Kennedy, and he had tried to tell me, you don't know, there are beautiful beaches in the state of Texas. And I said, I'm sure there are. However, the last time I went, there were certain issues, and I saw, and again, there were some, and he goes, well, that's just from the oil spill that happened like 2 or 3 years ago, or last year, or whatever. It's like, oh, when did that oil spill happen? And he said, oh, it was something that happened, in like April of 2010. Oh, April of 2010? Yeah, April. That's a weird coinky dink. Why is that a weird coinky dink? Why do you have to say it like that? Well, there's a timeline. And so, whatever. But that means nothing to you, so I'll just keep my mouth shut, and what do I need to point anything out for? Oh, you're just being snobby for growing up where you grew up. Didn't you say you grew up in Philadelphia? Yeah. Didn't you say you lived in West Virginia at one point in time? Yeah. Do Virginia beaches look like where there's the oil slicks and stuff? Because I haven't been to beaches in Virginia. I'll be honest on that. No, they have like these other beach and so on. And then I was like, okay, so, but I'm being snobby. I don't think so. I'll point that out. And so, it is what it is on that regard. And so, continue on. And so, I've tried pointing it out. And real quick before I continue on, I had actually entered in a contest back when I was in Marlboro Middle School. And Governor Christine Todd Whitman was in office. And I had done this huge pastel poster board of cleaning up the oceans. And I had been able to go out there and meet the governor and stuff like that. I wound up in a few places because, well, I saw some stuff and I was like, well, what is that over there? And, my teacher wasn't paying attention except for to, the different political people. And I was like, well, what's this? I found some stuff, and I'll just leave it at that. I found a few rooms that technically I should not have been in, but I was found. And then I was brought back to the to the group. And, they were very nice. And I don't mean that in the Anna way. I mean, they were genuinely nice. I didn't get in trouble. I was just asked how I found my way over there. Nonetheless, going into the teenage years, so in Washington State, I had been online looking at stuff and I found this show called Daria. And I remembered, like, when I was babysitting some of the kids in the neighborhood, every now and then Daria would come on and I was like, "Oh, that is a fantastic show." Like I can very much see certain characters in real life. And so I mean, there were certain personality traits of some that I could like, "Oh, I don't mind that so much." I don't like, similarly to like Sailor Moon in regards to I don't like that so much, but I really like that, but on that and so on and so forth. Like I really liked the character of Sailor Moon except for when she cried. Usually because she was like all just, she reminded me of the way Anna cries. Um, in a similar way of over very small and minute things in comparison and so but I as far as like Sailor Mars, yeah, that was pretty cool. Sailor Jupiter, Sailor Mercury, Sailor Venus, Sailor Neptune, Sailor Uranus, so on and so forth, Sailor Saturn. And I was just like, I really like, with the exception of like this trait here and this trait here. Like if I could take like this trait from this one and this one from this one and this one from this one, this one from this one, this da, 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 like that would be like the ideal. Um and then like the aspects of, well, relationships or whatever. I mean, not that they're not important. I'm not saying that at all. It's just more along the lines of even before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, when like in middle school, I didn't look at that sort of stuff the same way a lot of the females I knew in school looked at that. In high school, I didn't look at that stuff the same way. Like a lot of them were just, oh, we're going to be together forever. We're in high school. No. Like I'm sure there are some people who wind up that way. However, they probably have some time apart before they, I mean, I'm sure there are some that start off and stay together the whole time. I mean, I'm just, and realistically, when I was in high school, there was only one guy that I had been like, I could actually see myself spending like, a lot of time with and like romance and all that stuff as far as that I had actually dated and been in a relationship with. And then there were certain issues and that didn't work out. And I'd actually remembered him after waking up from my coma and being in medical hold. And then, I mean, I did go on one date ish, ish, with a guy who was like a brother to me. And it just didn't work out because at the end of the date, we were like, you're like my little sister. Yeah, you're like my big brother. So we could still be friends. Yes, we could still be awesome. And so yeah, we did. We stayed friends with the exception of like a situation. And it wasn't that I didn't want to be friends with him. It was I just didn't want to be beaten anymore. That's what that was. Is I literally dealt with that. And that was the reason why I had to deal with certain things. And so the irony and the similarities of my now dead ex-husband and certain aspects of my now ex-boyfriend that, wound up in Washington State with in certain regards. So anyway, in reference of Daria, it was one of those, went through the whole series and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, that quote is ideal. I don't have low self-esteem. I have low esteem for everyone else, except for certain individuals. Except for, yeah, because, I just I don't want to be grounded, and I know better. However, yeah, I mean, it was an ideal quote when I heard it because it was just one of those, well, yeah, it goes back to hoping for the best and expecting the worst, because it's one of those, as much as I had gone through up until that point, it was one of those, I mean, I still do hope, although that's starting to realistically dwindle in certain regards, because it's one of those, you know, I have, it's not that I expected in regards of that's what I deserve. That's not the way I expected it. More along the lines of looking at patterns of behavior. It's one of those, well, if that's going to be the same thing, then, well, there's the worst case scenario right there. I'd prefer to keep hoping for the better. It's just one of those, well, if that's what's going to continue on, um, and others prefer the worst for their lives, I'm still going to hope the best for mine. And not just my life, but those that I consider, the way I do. And so, while there have been those who have said, as they have said over the years, for example, how dare you care about your children the way you do? Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. How dare I? Yep. Still gonna do that, still do. And, how dare you care about, military guys and law enforcement guys the way you do? Yep, yep. So mean to care about those guys. You don't even know what they go through, and you do what you do. And then, especially after my Medal of Honor art project, not that I've had anybody say that since, winding up in Washington State in that regard. Just one of those, yeah, yeah. All right, well, I'll still, I'll still hope every which way. However, where you choose to put yourself in that regard of where I send my hope, well, I guess that depends on who you are and what you've done. And so, I have high esteem for quite a few individuals, quite a few groups and organizations. And then there's the ones that I labeled as cherubim ones. And those particular ones, well, I don't even have esteem for them, realistically, because that would require me to actually care in that regard. And, well, going back to the point of Dori, I have high esteem for quite a few, and then there are the ones that I don't. And that is by individuals' choices and actions, and whether they choose to do and be better or not. I prefer to continue to do my best to try to better things. And I know and comprehend that there are those who just want to be exactly like my dead ex-husband and just watch the world burn. And instead of being like that or anything similar to that, I prefer to see better things and do better things. I know that might be weird to some, however, that just is what it is. So in regards to, and the teenage years is very short, as you saw, like it goes from teenage years to military, because realistically, in reference to my teenager years, from the time that I turned 13 to the time that I was biologically 19, that realistically is so much that was forgotten. The stuff that I had paid attention to, in a grander aspect, was not able to remain as far as my memories after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And so the stuff that did remain as far as that was all of the studying that I had done in regards to getting myself prepared to join the military and having to fight to get emancipated, to be in the army, and then the injuries in regard to basic training and stuff of that nature. And when still technically biologically a teenager, because I was 17 when I had the head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And by the time I had my son, I had just turned 19 biologically. Literally. But I was in labor on my 19th birthday. So I didn't have a lot of things that are normal for certain individuals by a lot of aspects. And so, and then after my son was born, which was the 2nd of September in 2001, well, the stuff that I had remembered from the military studies before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, that came out real quick. Not just the military studies, but paying attention to things that were going on in the East Coast area when I was growing up because of the attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. And so I didn't have, not only did I not have a normal childhood, I didn't have a normal teenage life, nor did I have a normal, realistically, anything. I don't think I've ever had anything that would be on that same particular aspect. I know there are some who have had similar certain sets of circumstances. However, when it came to my teenage years, it was, what can I do to be a part of what is necessary, because of my nightmare that just was getting closer and closer, and I could feel it. And that's why I fought so hard to be emancipated. My biological parents really thought it was just a phase when I started wearing some camo gear. They really thought it was just a phase when I wanted to go to Mass, and that explanation in that regard. They thought it was just a phase that I started talking with only guys on the East Coast, as far as like congregants at Old Tenet Presbyterian Church. When I spoke with certain adults, it was, why are you speaking with them? They do say, yeah, because I need to pay attention. I need to ask them questions, not in regards of in a bad way, I need to know what to do, what is going on. I have a feeling like you keep making fun of me for my nightmares. That just, I get more and more details of my nightmares. And you can do that. That's your choice. However, in reference of the realities, my nightmares keep getting more and more, and I just can't allow that, because the aspects of my nightmares, I can see ways to prevent the bigger aspect, so that way it's not that. I can, like, and that in regards to the nightmare aspect, I would be, sleeping, and I'd see certain things, and then in my dreams, there'd be an individual, however you want to put it, that would ask me, well, how would you change this so this doesn't occur, or how it, and so, however you want to put that in that regard, it was, this would be done this way, this would be done this way, this would be done this way. And in the dream, it was, well, are you sure? Do you really think that that would be, well, I know who to ask because, tomorrow is going to be whatever as far as handbell choir or sanctuary choir or actual church service stuff. So I know who to run to, be like, hey, tell me, like, how does this get fixed? And, well, if this was and it just was what it was. So my teenage years, although technically even before my teenage years, from middle school all the way through high school, it was how does this get done? And what was done here and what was done there and how this, how that, so on and so forth. And so I didn't really have that where, some people actually got to do that back then that I knew. And while they were dealing with certain things, there's no denying that they were only seeing the aspects that they knew. And so I was looking at the bigger aspect. And then once, I think it was, what was it? I think I was actually in Illinois at that point because the color of the walls were a pastel green with dark green curtains. So I think that was Illinois. And that would be when the nightmare stuff turned to dreams in full. And that makes me nervous because that means that I need to fight to get into the army now, and it is not a phase. And so by that point I had already finished, the certain aspects of the cheerleader stuff that I didn't want to be a cheerleader, and certain things just kept going forward. So like I would talk with certain individuals in high school at Crystal Lake South by that point, and the discussions would just be extremely not typical high school discussions at that time. And ironically, in certain regards, one of the individuals was a neighbor that we'd sit around and we'd sit on the front step of either his parents' house or my biological parents' house. We'd sit there and we'd smoke and we'd talk for hours and just about major stuff, not little stuff. No, we weren't smoking pot. We actually were just smoking cigarettes, just talking for hours. And then the other individual was the one guy that I had gone on one date with, and you're like my big brother. Yeah, you're like my little sister. Yeah, well, never. And then, when it came to graduating high school early, because it wasn't a year early, it was a semester early, that was the end of it. And I just kept pushing and pushing until my biological parents finally said, fine, just if that's going to get you to stop complaining, and thank you. And then the injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And waking up from the coma. And then when I was at Fort Sam Houston, in medical hold unit in the original barracks that were there when I was at least there in 2000. There were a few times where I had waking dreams where I was awake and I was conscious, though I was sleeping. And what would knock me out of it was essentially a Charlie horse that I wound up having. But I would be in the bed racing, like shifting gears and driving and all these things. And I was awake, but I was asleep. I guess it's called lucid dreaming or something. And I would see these different things that I needed to take care of, and it was just it was a weird aspect. And so that being said, and going into the oil changes and stuff like that, the joke in that regard is the first car that I had done an oil change was a 442 Buick, or no, Oldsmobile. It's an Oldsmobile. And that was when I was growing up in New Jersey. And there was a guy who was working on the 442, and he just couldn't get the oil filter off. And I was a child and got it. I was so happy because the oil absolutely destroyed the dress my biological mother sent me to the garage in. It was this pure white dress with a whole bunch of pastel flowers on it. It's like, I'm going to the garage, right? I don't want to wear this. Well, you're going to wear it. Fine. I won't have to wear it ever again. Good luck getting oil out of white. I mean, it can be done. It just couldn't be done back then. And so the stockings had to be thrown away. The white shoes, no, they were patent leather. It didn't matter. It did not matter. Not with the oil back then at all. And so I know there are guys who know what I'm talking about. And so I had also later in San Antonio, this was in 2012, I had been in it was a choice between going into oncoming traffic or going off to the side. That was it. I mean, the other option was hitting a German Shepherd, full grown. And for those who know the area of I-35, and I want to say it's Thousand Oaks, but it's where the train tracks are, and it has a big lift to it. I went over it, and right as going over it, German Shepherd crossed in front of the area, and to get to not be in a head-on collision or hit that car, and that it was a black Kia Soul, went over the edge and dropped into the ditch. And it was like a 15, 20-foot drop. It's like, okay, what can I stand? And so kept the passenger as a female safe, and then also, of course, my son and my daughter in the back of the car, making sure they were safe. And all that happened was at a little abrasion. It's gone. Well, there's like a little bit of a dot left, but that's it. And that was from the airbag rubbing up against my skin, essentially. And that was it. That was it. The car did not survive. At all, whatsoever. The engine cracked at a diagonal, and the axles for the wheels, both of them were like outward. And I mean, everybody was alive. Nobody needed to go to the emergency room. Everybody was okay. My son and my daughter thought it was a roller coaster ride. That was it. And, the EMS guys, they showed up, checked me out, and they're like, well, are you, I mean, I just got this little abrasion. It's just a little burn. It's no big deal. and they were just like, oh, and, they obviously had seen the damage in that regard. And it was like, yeah, well, it's not that big of a deal. I survived. And everybody else survived. So, it's cool. What's the big deal? And so those guys were kind of a little freaked out. And so then later that night, I wound up going to an event after my son and my daughter were taken care of. And everybody that was there, they were like, are you really here? Yes, I'm really here. We heard about how that went. Yeah? Well, what about it? Like, everybody's okay? Yeah, everybody's okay. Did anything happen to, oh, I got this little bit. They're just, so you're just gonna be alive. Yeah, well, that's part of it. That's how that happens. So, and a bunch of people kind of freaked out. I was like, what are you freaking out over? It's just, I mean, not like that I want to be involved with anything worse, but like realistically, come on now. It's not that, I mean, I've been in worse accidents, so comparatively, I don't want to have to test that theory. I hope to not ever have to ever again. Just saying, it's cool. Like I'm breathing, it's a good thing. It's kind of important for the earth. So anyway, the joke that I had made over the years, even since I was a child, especially after the first oil change, was, well, technically my first car is a 1982 Shoemobile with automatic kneecaps. And I can't wait to get my driver's license so that way I don't have to use my 1982 Shoemobile with automatic kneecaps. I prefer having a license and being able to drive. And those particular words you can think about, and you guys have a good one. Comment, like, and share, and subscribe to my official YouTube channel. Have a good one.